You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the Boss Hog of Liberty podcast. This is episode number 208 of the Central Indiana's favorite podcast. Jeremiah Morrell here, joined by co-host Jesse Riddle, producer Zach Burcham, and returning guest. It's been a couple of years, but we're greatly glad. That's a terrible phrase, but we're very happy. We're very happy to have Steve Horwitz back in the building.
And I'm very happy to be here.
Formerly the distinguished meatloaf lovers prof of Ball State University. Things have changed now, and now you are simply the distinguished professor of free enterprise.
That is correct.
At Chirp Chirp U. So we're glad to have you. Glad to have you back in the building. We're going to talk about the economy and how we're coming out of the COVID economic recession and what's happening and some of the symptoms. And maybe by the end of it, Steve can help to color in this picture we paint and understand what's actually going on and if it's all interrelated or if it's all just miscellaneous BS and we have to just deal with it. Got to thank our patrons, Christy Avery of Fort Wayne, Indiana, the incredible, awesome Christy Avery, John Phillips, Andy Moore, Buick GMC. I tried to send my dad over there today to buy a new truck. Sounds like he might be in the running. Anthony Meyer, who made a visit to Henry County. I saw, Zach, that he was down in Spiceland at the truck stop.
Yep. Visiting the finer establishments of Henry County.
He always tells us when he's in town when we're not here. I don't think he wants to meet us.
I don't think he does either, but
he also made fun of our Rural King recently, which he's a donor, so I guess he can do what he wants. But I think that's what triggered Zach in the Patreon, or not Zach, your Zach, Dakota today, posting his all of the. I think they bought rat traps, they looked at bunnies, and they bought candy for his kid, all in one trip to the local Rural King.
And baby chicks. There's baby chicks.
And there's chicks too. Steve, is there a Rural King in Hamilton County? Have you ever been?
I know I've seen them. I don't know if they're in Hamilton County. I might have seen them in the North Country.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the great thing about those places, as you just said, right? It's for small towns. You can buy everything there. You don't, division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. Small town, have everything in one store.
It's like a Walmart for rural folks. Literally, you can buy a rabbit and hydraulic oil, and then you can buy ammunition for you can buy a gun.
Right. Well, that's it. You can buy the thing you want to get rid of. Right. And the thing itself.
Yeah.
Right? You get the rat trap and the rats.
And they've got the equipment to clean the rabbit as well. You got the whole, the whole processing facility is there. And you can turn it into jerky with the stuff that's in the deer aisle. Also have to thank Fiddler's Green. Chris Lamb is awesome. Please stop by Fiddler's Green Cigar Company Lounge at the Newcastle Broad Street Cruise-In this Saturday, June 5th, starting at 5:00. Located just a couple blocks from our studio in front of the Henry County Courthouse to enjoy their fine selection of hand-rolled cigars and accessories. Need a special gift for Dad? Check out their limited quantity gift sets. Fiddler's Green Cigar Company is a veteran-owned company. 10% of all their sales will go to the Wounded Warrior Project. Fiddler's Green Cigar Company and their mobile cigar lounge going to be here just a couple days, so check that out. This show is about our lives in rural Indiana. We're here to push your boundaries and make you think as individuals. Hopefully, sometimes we'll provoke you. Other times we'll make you laugh, but hopefully you'll always learn something new. Zach, we got some merch out there, don't we, somewhere?
Yep, we do. I'm about to post a link up. We have the T-Chip stores, tchip.com/BHOL1234 mug. That's your T-shirts. I'm going to post up the, what's it called?
You've given Jesse a stroke because you're listing them all instead of saying, "Hey, just go to the link tree that Jesse slaved over." He slaved over a hot stove to make things easier.
I'm also going to post the link tree in the chat for those people that didn't catch all that. You don't have to catch all of it because we'll post it in just a few minutes or just a second here.
But there's T-shirts, and in case you want a pandemic mask, you can buy one to put in your shadow box to remember what we just got through. It's over. We went to the Indy 500 last weekend. The only people still wearing their masks were, in fact, the sign ambassadors.
Yeah, pretty much. It was
or the mask ambassadors who held signs that said, "Please wear your mask."
Yeah, it was minimal by the end of the weekend.
It is fascinating, I think, to see how quickly that has flipped and how much it's not even the honor system. It's people are just, everyone's had enough. And so we're just going to don't ask, don't tell. We're just not going to, just as long as you're not causing trouble, do whatever you want. And I think it's really just fascinating sort of sociological.
There's
process.
So many levels of authority, quote unquote, levels of authority involved. And if you have a municipality that says they want to do one thing, but then and you have a private group that says, well, we're going to follow what this one municipality says, but then they get their knees cut off because the CDC says do something else. People are like, it's going to be outside. I don't care anymore. At some point, you've lost the consent of the governed, and it's just, we're going.
That's it. And it's interesting. My little gauge is the Fisher's Farmers Market, where a couple weeks ago, Fisher's got rid of their mask requirements, and so you don't need to wear one. A couple weeks ago there, even outside on a Saturday morning, it was at least half the people were wearing masks, right? And then I went this past week, and I'd say 20% were wearing them. So you could just watch it happen.
My gauge has been, when I go to lunch somewhere, I always have my mask. I've still got it in my pocket here. I've got it in my pocket, and if the venue asks me to wear it, I'll wear it to go in, and I'll have it on me. But if I don't have to, I'm fully vaccinated. I don't care anymore. Today I went to the Savages Ale House, which is the most of all of the Muncie bars. It's the most crunchy granola, progressive, trendy. And they took their mask sign down. So I think we're officially at the point. Any place that I'm going to go has removed it.
I didn't say anything tonight, but our dinner tonight was the first time I believe I've been served by a waitstaff person without a mask.
That was masked, unmasked. Yeah.
I was going to say when you get closer to Marion County and the donuts, you're still going to have servers with masks on. And a lot of the Uber granola crunchers. And
Marion County, and Marion County's just been stricter in general about relaxing their rules than has Hamilton, for example, because we're pretty close to the border. And so you can tell when you cross 96th Street, the rules do shift and the behaviors do shift in some interesting ways. And I do think there's a whole other, we can talk about this another time, but there's a whole other story about the way in which the people who've taken all this stuff the most seriously have been the progressives.
Yeah.
And I find that just fascinating. I know the people I know who didn't leave their house for a year are almost all in that category. And it's bizarre.
It's a badge of honor.
Right. It is. Well, and I think a lot of them, I don't want to be perceived as Trump. Right. But, of all people, I might have been one who should have been in my house for a year, but there was just no way. I went out to dinner last June, I think, about this time of year, right? And went out to dinner downtown Indy, and they were spaced and everything where we went. And we're sitting there, and I look out on the patio, and who sits down on the patio with his daughter but my oncologist? And I'm like, okay, it's okay to eat out now, right? But I can't imagine living in my house for a year. I just can't.
Yeah, I didn't know there were people like that until I saw other people on my Facebook who they're like, I haven't had a meal outside. And I'm like, all right, well, you need to.
Okay, then. But
I think you need to call your therapist because I really do. I want them to talk through it.
We didn't go out until June of last year, maybe May or June of last year. And that was 2 months. And at the time it felt, because we've got Facebook memories to go back and look at.
Right.
So at the time it felt like that was an incredibly long period of time, that 45 or 60 days of a lack of service here. And even I went to New York State and we were talking about this at dinner. In mid-June, I had a sit-down meal last year. So maybe 2.5 months that it was not happening. That actually feels like an incredibly small amount of time when you look back and it's been 15 months and people are just now coming out going, oh my God.
I know. It's,
Were you uncomfortable tonight when you had somebody that was unmasked?
Oh, no, it was great.
It's liberating.
There's at this point, right? Look, here's what we know. We know that the thing spreads when you are in indoor, poorly ventilated, crowded spaces for a long period of time. That's how this thing spreads. We were at dinner tonight. We were like the only people in there, right? It was not busy. That has a nice tall ceiling. It's clearly well ventilated. It wasn't crowded. We were there for an hour. But there's no reason in the world you should be thinking about wearing a mask given the level of vaccination.
I was going to say on top of the vaccinations, it's like if the vaccine's doing its job.
It's, and then there's the people who I see walking their dog by themselves with a mask on, right?
There was it probably was like a couple weeks, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, I was in Indianapolis and there were kids out playing on their porch and the kids had masks on. And I was like, what in the world?
It's a hard habit. I think for
bizarre.
Kids, it's a hard habit to break. I see it with our kids who, It's a hard habit to break. And the schools have made it so clear they have to follow that rule that I think the kids have just said
it's just normalized to them.
Just normalized.
We just wear
and
it.
I don't mean that in any
Pavlov's
sort
dog.
of nasty, autocracy sense. I think it's just they've spent a year in a world where that's what it is, and so getting them to realize no, it's okay now, right? Is hard.
There's a psychology for if you're 4 years old, you've spent 25% of your life in a pandemic, and it's what you know.
Right.
Well, it's Pavlov's dog, right? So it's you ring the bell, like you get up, you put the mask on, right?
Yeah,
it's all
right.
Pavlov,
Yeah.
and so I know I'm getting more used to it because I'm no longer like freaking out when I'm watching like Seinfeld and they get up in monks and I'm not like, why don't you have your mask on?
Yeah.
Like I want to yell at them, put your mask on, but
And now
I'm not
there's
doing
this
that anymore.
awkward moment about shaking hands with people. Right. Where are we allowed to? Is it okay?
I've been
Are you
hugging
one of
people.
those or are you
Yeah.
one of those? Right. I mean, and
Did you shake my hand? I know if you're Democrat or Republican, right?
Well,
or you're
right.
Libertarian,
That's-
maybe
but
you did it, but you
that's-
used the wrong hand.
That's the problem. I mean, my daughter lives in New York City and there is a real thing there that if you take things too lightly, you're perceived as being, conservative, Trump, whatever. And many people there don't want to be perceived that way. So.
Coming from the liberty side, we're just stuck right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Where I'm a libertarian that got the vaccine, so therefore half of the people that I associate with politically think I'm crazy, and the other folks think that I don't take nearly enough precautions. So I'm an outcast. I found a way to turn myself into an outcast.
I'm with you, buddy.
Yep.
We're there. All right. So what I wanted to talk about, and this can be free flowing, but I have a few general themes. If you're a patron, you did get the show notes dropped in the Facebook group today to give you some links and some ideas to direct us. What I felt like, Steve, is that the economy, as we've tried to restart, has been incredibly clunky.
That's a good word.
We try to do one thing, and then there's a barrier. So it might be a labor shortage. It might be that supply seems to be constrained. So then as soon as we have an issue with supply, something else happens. We've been very one step forward, 1.5 steps back, trying to restart.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think a lot of those things are, real in the sense that, the various restrictions and stuff that were part of the pandemic response have made it difficult for firms to do things. Factories shut down when there were outbreaks in places. International shipping became more challenging. We ordered a dishwasher back in like November and it didn't get delivered till April, right?
Our behaviors changed in the way that we expected deliveries to happen or us to acquire goods.
This is a huge, what we would call a huge real shock, and the supply bottlenecks are real. We've had other things happen on top of it. We could talk about some of those in a bit, but so I think it's demand is back, right? People, just like we were just talking, right? People are getting out, they're going out to dinner, they're going to IMS, they're doing all these things, right? But supply, the sort of ability of supply to respond, as you say, in the way we're used to, just isn't the same. And so it's going to take, I think, a while for these things to iron themselves out. And I think it's really important that we don't overreact on a policy level, right? And just
let the market respond and let business owners do what they need to do.
Out. It's not, again, this isn't something artificial that we can just fix. There's real issues going on there. And that we just gotta give time. And we've never, the modern economy has never dealt with something like this. We shut it down for, depending how long you want to count, but we shut it down.
We shut it down for a month in some places or for many months.
Yeah, right. And
there are parts of California that are still,
right.
The thought of going and getting a haircut is still shocking.
That's the other one. Not that I have to worry about it, but that's the other one. Like people haven't had a haircut for a year or whatever. That's strange to me too. But in any case, I think all of these things are all, with time, they will begin to work themselves out. And it does require some patience on our part. And again, I think the patience has to take the form of not overreacting on the policy end and just say, look, let's let it work itself out. Even, I know we can talk about it some more in a bit, but like the lumber stuff is interesting too. One problem there, of course, is that we did have tariffs that made it more, artificially expensive. But even if you put that aside, there really were supply issues and so on, that were causing problems. But the latest is that seems to be fixing itself. Prices seem to be coming down a little bit from where they were. I'm about to have some work done on my porch tomorrow. And the same guy who built the porch is doing some other stuff for us on the porch. And he said, you're lucky I did this for you 3 years ago because you pay 3 times today of what I charged you back then. But I think it's coming down. I mean, from what I understand, that stuff is coming down. And so just some patience here. It's often hard. But, given what we've been through, it seems like it's the least we can ask of people. Sort of say,
So pull your mic down just a touch for me. If you just drop it a touch, you'll be good. Let's talk about the energy side of it, because since the election or the inauguration of Joe Biden, we've seen a number of things happen on the petroleum and the energy side, where there was the Keystone Pipeline kind of that deal went away, and that was immediately increased the price of my goodness, I've left a phone on. I've got to tell you guys a story about why I have 3 phones at some point. It's just incredibly painful. But I purchased an extra phone that doesn't get used, so everything that comes in on this one is just exclusively for. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't ring at all. I've never made a phone call on it, but I ran outside to grab it for some text from Jesse. We had the supply issue with Keystone XL going away, and then you had a disruption to the Colonial fuel pipeline, which goes from Florida up to the Mid-Atlantic. With some, I guess, Jesse, it was your Russian hackers that were involved.
Somebody.
Some sort of a cyber attack or a ransom attack.
Ransomware attack.
Which led to people inventing new unapproved non-government approved containers to put their gasoline into. But that created a massive upheaval again, to the point where our gas here was over $3 a gallon.
Well, it created FOMO too, right? So like even in Indiana, even though we were not directly affected by it, it created artificial demand.
Yeah.
I think you said your folks at the local BP ran out of grade 87.
Well, they said they ran out of. I don't think they ran out.
That's really
I think they enacted some emergency pricing, and they said they cut off 85 and 87 and only allowed 89 because that was like the most expensive one they had. And
the day that happened, I immediately thought of Steve, because I thought, well, you're price sensitive once you get to $3.82 a gallon for the 93 gas.
Yeah. And well, so that's interesting, because I didn't see, at least in Hamilton County, I didn't see any places that even suggested they were running out or wouldn't sell. Right. I mean, prices went up here, though not as, the impact here was certainly not what it's on the East Coast, but there, I mean, stations were out, and again, it was panic buying on the demanders who just saw what was happening or were worried about it. And the problem, of course, with gas, jokes about unauthorized storage aside, you can't really store it very easily.
We don't have the ability. If I had to store gasoline, I could maybe store 100 gallons between all of every vessel that I have to keep it in, maybe 100 gallons.
Right. And it's not like toilet paper, right? Where if you really were concerned that there was going to be this shortage, you go out and you buy 4 things at Costco and you stick them in the garage or whatever.
It's difficult to stabilize for any length of time.
Right. And toilet paper doesn't spoil. So you can do that kind of stuff. So what do you do with gas? You just, you panic buy, and everyone wants to keep their tank full all the time. So, I mean, that was a real problem. But again, as you said, a bunch of things going on there, right? And of course, the biggest thing was that stations couldn't raise their prices to choke off that panic demand, because they were fearful, if they did, that they'd be slapped with price gouging charges.
Every state has rules where your attorney general is going to come in and cut your knees off if you try to use emergency pricing.
Right. So, I mean, we can walk through that whole story, but the bottom line is, right, that if if prices had gone up, say, pick a number, to $5 or $6 a gallon in response to that, then people got some choices to make, right? How big a panic are you really in, right? And are you willing to pay that price, right, to get what you need? And I think,
and at that point, folks might say, you know what, I only need 6 gallons to get me through the week.
That's right. And what it does do is it forces you to decide to make sure you're using gas for the most important uses. I mean, when I teach this or talk about it, I talk about water, right? If you put price controls on, people will use water for whatever they want to. I mean, they'll use it to drink or maybe, to get clean, but they'll also go in and buy a case of 24 bottles and bathe their dog in it if it's cheap. right? When you let the price go up, suddenly the dog bathers are going, you know what? I don't really think I need it that much.
Zach, I think Steve would make a really good dry camper at a race.
Oh, absolutely. And I was
You've only got 30 gallons of gray water, and you've only got 30 gallons of black water, and maybe 40 gallons of fresh, and that's what you have for 4 days.
Figure it out.
Right.
Use it for the most important things. Well, right, and it's also like, if you've ever done intermittent fasting, it's the same thing, right? Where you're restricted to 900 calories per day. You better make them the 900 good calories, no donuts.
Right.
You're eating the stuff, you're eating protein and vegetables. So yeah, I mean, that's the whole point, is that letting prices go up forces us to be choosy and to only use those things for the most valuable uses. And that just didn't happen with the gas. And so you get gas at a cheap price, but no gas to be found, right? So what good does a cheap price do you if supply is zero? But even there, right? I mean, I'm not sure the Keystone had that big of an impact other than a sort of signal about the long run.
I felt like immediately after that, day one after the inauguration, that was announced. Yeah. And I feel like from that point, you did see the price of oil per barrel.
Yeah, and I think that was just a reaction to that announcement and people imagining that gas prices were going to be higher down the road. But prices did go up, and we choked off any of the kinds of problems we saw after the ransomware stuff. So again, what's weird about a lot of things we're talking about is that they all look like they're the same sort of thing, but they all have these different complicated stories behind them, some of which are just, you got to give it time. Some of which are, we made some bad policy choices, tariffs on lumber, or anti-gouging laws, and so there's a mix of things going on. And again, I just think we're in a world, recovering from a global pandemic that we've never been in before in a modern technological, globalized economy.
So we've talked about the energy side, but if we talk about houses and lumber, because that's where so many of us are seeing headlines, if you want to build a deck, all of a sudden it's not a $2,000 project, it's a $7,500 project, or you're building a fence, a privacy fence, whatever. All of a sudden, maybe now you're going to go with a vinyl fence instead of a traditional lumber one.
Or like me, you're just not going to build a fence now,
or you won't build the wall. But there's also folks that are saying, okay, hey, I want to build a new house. Okay, I can make good money off my house. If you look at the show notes, CNBC is reporting that the average house has absorbed a $36,000 lumber increase in the bill to actually frame out a house. If you say, okay, I'm going to look at buying a house, all of a sudden now the price of a house has skyrocketed, and you've got 10 to 12 offers on, even in our community here, 10 to 12 offers on a house, and they're just not available.
Right. It's crazy in Fishers. My wife's ex-husband has been looking to buy a house, and he gave up because first he couldn't compete with the kinds of offers people were making.
That are a lot of cash offers.
And that's a lot of cash offers. And so he did the right thing, which was to
step out of the market.
Before he did that, he lowered his range. He said, all right, let's look for some cheaper houses. That way I can afford to bid higher, right? And take on, but you're getting less house for that. And as it turned out, that didn't work either for all the reasons we're talking about. He said, you know what? Enough. I'm going to use the money to make some improvements where I am and then come back in 6 months and see where we are. I think this is a lot. I mean, some of it is the lumber stuff and all that. And when the prices of new houses go up, there's a ripple effect to the existing stock. But some of it's also pent up demand. I mean, I know people who moved during the pandemic. I can't imagine doing that, right? That's a nightmare. So there's a lot of people, I think, who held off and decided, all right, now's the time to do this. And it's crazy. We just house across the street and one over from us. So I'm thrilled. They got, I think, the 629 they were asking for it. And I'm like, my wife and I are like, wow, okay, then thank you for the positive externalities there. Cause now I have a better sense of what our house might be worth if the market stays. I couldn't believe they got that for that house. But it's crazy. And it's,
you also have some folks that have received more disposable cash in the last year so that they can make a down payment on a house and get in. That's probably opened the market up for something.
That and people didn't spend, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that's the other thing. Even if you put aside the stimulus checks and the unemployment and all that, even if you were working the whole time, you weren't going out. People weren't going out to dinner or getting their haircut. they weren't spending on movies and things like that. So I think there's a lot of people with cash to spend and have been waiting for this, and here's their opportunity. So
and banks are lending at insane interest rates.
Well, there is that part too,
which is increasing the demand.
Yeah,
and because you can you don't have to put near as much down. Yep. And you're saving a lot on the back end,
Yeah. So. And we just refinanced a few months ago. Yeah. And it's always this game, right? If you wait, if we just waited another month, we would have done a little bit better. It's like the TV you bought, right? Oh, in 2 months, you're going to go, damn, why didn't I wait 2 months? Cause it's down $100. Yeah. But and that's certainly part of it too, right?
Yeah. As I was saying in our chat, I was talking about how there are car companies giving away 0% like APR interest rates for the entire term of the loan.
Yeah.
And supposedly they've got some fees or something when you go to the dealership, but I'm still like, that is amazing. At least the fees are up front. Like, you know what you're paying.
Have you tried to rent a car recently?
I haven't, but I've had friends who've tried and it's not easy.
Yeah. We rented when we were in Arizona, and I can't believe what I paid for a bunch of things.
It's not $49 a day to rent a car.
No, it was not $49 a day in Phoenix. It was a little more than that, but
I have heard Hawaii is like $600-700 a day to rent a car.
Yeah, so
it's very difficult to find one. Yeah. And so that once again, prices have accommodated.
Right. And that's right. And so now do you really need it? And now people, the interesting thing is that people who can't afford those car prices are actually renting U-Hauls just to drive around town.
Yeah.
Because they're cheaper. And again, this was also the rental car stuff was a function of some supply problems and other issues. And apparently, I haven't looked this for a while, but last that I read, the rental car company sold off a bunch of stock during the pandemic, assuming
because they don't need to carry these assets that aren't going anywhere.
Exactly. And now they're having challenges.
Well, I was going to say that's the used car market, right? The used car market is now appreciating, which I haven't never been a part of.
Yeah.
And I literally bought a car new and not brand new, but 2018, a newer car with less than 30,000 miles on it, in February. And I was like, I could probably flip my car and make a profit and just find some crappy car for a couple of months until like everything blows over.
Yeah.
Cause I think that bubble is going to pop.
Yeah. That will.
As soon as the chip stuff gets fixed, that's the other shortage.
Yes.
That's not on our paperwork.
Yeah. It is.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't expect you to read the show notes. We'll handle it.
Yeah. I just don't know how to read, Jer.
Top to bottom, left to right.
But, like the chip shortage, right? Which is, that is from, multiple angles too, is COVID, cryptocurrency mining, and now car production. All of that is suffering. Yep. And so it's insane to watch the economy try to, it's kind of like starting a mower that don't want to start. You're like, you just keep pulling on it. And it's like, you hear it turning over and you're like, come on.
Right. And as, sort of back out to the big picture here, right? All of these things we're talking about are so complex and are there's so many nodes and so many interactions that there's just no way that we can sort of understand it synoptically and imagine that we can fix it, right? I mean, this is the sort of standard kind of particularly Austrian school argument about economic planning, right? And I think so it calls for that humility, right? We can't imagine trying to fix all these little things. So let entrepreneurs, let people sort out their local situations. That's what's going to fix
the answer is time.
So this is
time and leaving people free, right, to use their judgment. Yeah,
I'm such a libertarian. It never comes to mind of, hey, Zach, let's get your people, the Democrats, involved, and we'll let them fix it.
Well, a lot of people are trying to find somebody to blame. Like I think on the gas price thing, even it was the thing where they laid off a lot of their tanker drivers due to the pandemic because gas prices were so low, people weren't using it, and now it was taking time to hire new drivers.
Yep.
And so even like on the house thing, people were stuck at home last year, so I think a lot of people fixed up their houses because they were there to like.
Also true.
They were staring at that crack in the drywall and like, we gotta get this fixed.
Yeah.
And so. There's so much going on.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said, I think and people are borrowing against their mortgages and they don't care how much the lumber costs because they're saving so much on interest. I think a little bit, especially in new homes. But I was going to say there's actually something I want to bring up because I've went back and listened to all the podcasts on Boss Hog of Liberty with you, Steve, and it's never been discussed as, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's like, what if you could have like a quick elevator pitch of like, Austrian Economics versus Keynesian, like, what is that elevator pitch? Because, like, I don't know. Maybe Zach doesn't know. I don't know. Like, Zach, do you know what Austrian economics even means? Like, what it is?
No.
So I don't want to I don't want to like continue to go down that path because I know it can get complex.
You tried to limit me with the elevator pitch.
Yeah,
which is tough.
It's a tall it's
tough in general with me.
Yeah,
tough on
I've seen some infographics, and I'm like, okay, this is okay, makes a little. So
here's
bit of
the
sense,
thing. Okay, here's the first thing I'm going to say, which is to go after sort of the premise of this. I think one of the problems that often libertarians and others, or people who know libertarian stuff, fall into is thinking that the world of economics divides into Austrians and Keynesians, right? And sort of that's the division. And I think the reason for that, are the amazing Hayek Keynes videos, right? Which I love and adore, and John and Russ are friends of mine. I was almost in the second one. I should have been. It's a long story, but I should have been in the second one. By the way, I would have played Mises, in the fight scenes where he's like the corner man, right? I would. So, but anyway. And so that has made it seem like that's the debate. And there's many more schools.
I know there's like Chicago School and all that.
Right. Yeah. So I want to, that wasn't so much for you, but for our wonderful listening audience.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you did bring that up because I don't like fallacy, like, like the fallacy there. So,
yeah. So I think the elevator pitch version is something like this, at least relevant to what we're talking about. For Austrians, we start by understanding that the economy is a kind of ecosystem of knowledge, and that how to understand the economy is to understand how people and why people make exchanges, and the rules and institutions, the rules of the game that frame those exchanges, and then what the consequences of those are, both intended and unintended. And when you start to look at economics that way, a couple of things happen. One, you realize that it's individual perceptions that drive economic decision making, and that there's no way for an outside observer to know what those are. And then secondly, well, okay, if we're all in these sort of almost seems solipsistic world of our own subjective evaluations, how does anything ever get done? Well, that's when we look at the institutions and rules. In particular, we look at prices, and we understand the way, given our previous conversation, that prices enable us to coordinate our activity with each other, to form expectations, to figure out what other people are trying to do, and to guide our behavior, to know that at $6 a gallon, don't buy as much gas, at $50 for 24 bottles of water, don't use it on your dog. That's how we know those things. And without markets and prices and so on, we wouldn't know them. And of course, if one station says, I'm going $6, and somebody else says, I'm going $5.50, the market's talking to itself as well. Yes, right. And so for Austrians, one of the key concepts is this idea of spontaneous or emergent order, that what the outcomes in the market are while the product of human action, they're not products of human design. No one can design those outcomes. Rather, they are the sort of systematic unintended consequences of choice under uncertainty, given the rules of the game. Yeah. I think it's a long elevator. But I think it's important to me because I've tried to explain it to people. I'm like, look, I don't like, I've listened to, there's another Friedman that's not, Milton Friedman, but it's his like brother or something. Is his son David or his grandson Patrick? I think it might be David, but he's like a Chicago school kind of guy. That's David. Yeah. So, and I've listened to podcasts with him and like him talk about like why he's not one or the other, more popular ones, at least in our circles. So it's just been, I was like, the Austrian way of thinking is, you want uninterrupted market signals so that you know what is going on. Yep. And from there you can make a decision, and there's not a lot of like, we're going to try to tweak it, or it's just like, these are the way things are. Right. And the one thing we can tweak is we can watch those rules of the game and those institutions to make sure that they are doing the best they can to provide those signals. And I would be remiss at this point, because I can hear my friends at the Cato Institute screaming in my ear, if I didn't pitch my own book from Cato, which is Austrian Economics, an Introduction, which you can find at online in a free PDF, or you can buy at Amazon Online, you can find it at libertarianism.org in their sort of publication section. And I should also tell your audience that if they're not familiar with Cato's libertarianism.org site, they should be. There's tremendous resources there, from video to written stuff to all over the place. And it's one place these days that I write a fair amount for. And in particular, I recommend the sort of broad overview essay there, which is I think called What is a Libertarian, or What is Libertarianism, by Grant Babcock. It's the single best introduction to libertarianism that I've ever read, certainly to what I would call the good libertarianism.
Sure.
So, Steve has touched on something that I think that's a perfect dovetail into where we're going next, and that's outside pressures on markets. And I think one that we've seen in Indiana, and it was just relieved, was unemployment. Extra surplus unemployment. The governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, a couple of weeks ago said we're no longer going to accept the federal money that's been supplementing unemployment, giving folks extra money. He also said we're now going to require folks to actually go and apply for jobs and work, because I think the governor's office was starting to hear from business owners that, hey, we've got demand, but we can't get labor. I know the company I work for has been trying to restaff 5, 6, 7 months, and it's been the same story across the board. Not every industry, many industries have, and many businesses have been saying that this is our problem.
Yep. We just heard from our landscapers today, who were supposed to come out and do a bunch of work for us on June 9th or something, June 6th. And they contacted us today and said, we got to push it till later in the month because we're short staffed. We don't have the people. And my wife and I went out to lunch at a sort of fast foodie, make your own Mediterranean kind of place. And the sign said now closed on Mondays due to staffing problems. So this is real. Okay. There's a really interesting debate going on, particularly within Indiana, about how much of this is due to sort of people finding those benefits to be close enough to what they can earn in the marketplace that why work 40 hours if I can get it not working.
I will say anecdotally that my place of employment, all of a sudden, as soon as that happened, you started seeing folks walk back in the door saying, hey, I want to fill out an application.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You definitely saw, as soon as that public policy changed, that stream of folks, whether you were trying to hire somebody or not, they started coming through the doors.
We're going to have a great test of this, right? And we're going to see what happens to the numbers over the next couple of months. The other factor that is part of this too, and again, I think there's been some back and forth on this one also, is, and now as we go into summer, perhaps less, but a lot of what we call secondary earners, which are the sort of party to the marriage or partnership whose labor supply is more flexible, stayed home to take care of kids when the schools were closed. Now that's mostly, but not exclusively, women. And so at least for a while anyway, even offering good wages, they weren't likely to come out of the house and work because someone had to be watching.
Because the cost of childcare outweighed
that
side of it.
Yeah. I mean, you can, and you couldn't find, you were going to find childcare. And I think a lot of parents sort of rightly said, if my kid's going to be doing school from home, I don't want someone else in the house with them.
Right.
I want to be there to make sure that stuff's getting done. Certainly for us, that was a concern as well. So now that is less of an issue in the summertime, as we get into fall, looks like certainly in Hamilton, or at least HSE, is going to be 5 days a week back to normal. Whether that changes too. So we'll see.
Zach, you're our expert with children. Newcastle was back full time
the entire time. Yeah.
I
think they had a virtual school option.
Yeah.
I know another factor. They've been like my next door neighbor. All of a sudden the value of remote work became readily apparent to a lot of employers and to employees. And so I think some people she obviously entered the workforce, but she found a job working from home.
Yeah.
And so I think that's easier that's a job that wasn't an option for a lot of people before, but she still has her kid in childcare. Somebody's watching her child, but during she drops him off and then goes back home and works and doesn't have to go to a place to work.
There's also a contingent of folks that said, I'm going to remove myself from the labor pool for their own safety as well.
Yes.
There are people that said, I'm not coming back, and they may not have yet made the decision that they are
okay to come back.
In a position to come back.
I think that's very much the case as well. And I do think the work from home is really interesting too, because, those of us who were lucky enough to have jobs where we could do that, or had employers who allowed it in a way, my wife's organization would never have allowed that prior to the pandemic, but allowed her to work from home significantly during it, and is now, as of June 1st, has sort of said, nope, everybody back in the office now, which is a good sign in the sense that okay, things are getting back to normal, but it's like, no, actually there was, being able to work from home 1 day or 2 days a week had some real advantages. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's definitely part of it too. And some jobs, right? You can't really staff the McDonald's working from home, but other things you can. And, those of us who were able to work from home and not lose a paycheck or anything while all this was going on have to be grateful.
There's two couple things going on. I feel like, right. First off, this was like a dry run of UBI.
Yeah.
So just a little bit, right? Like it's just, and it's like, you see kind of what's happening. And the second thing is
there are still some households. I know that stimulus feels like it's over for some folks, but there are folks that are getting ready to start receiving more checks again next month.
Right.
For childcare.
I guess I saw some ad or something on Facebook. I've never seen them, but
that was Russian disinformation.
Yeah, exactly.
The UBI for some households will continue, Jesse.
So, but I'm saying is that I would not be surprised once people do get back to the office, especially companies like McDonald's and stuff, where they don't go into the research of how do we prepare for this again, and how can we limit our dependencies on these people, and automate more of their work. That is my thing. And that's what I've always said UBI was going to do. I said, you give people UBI, that's not going to solve any problems. It's just going to create more problems, because you're going to have unskilled people now that didn't go through any reskilling process, and they're not going to be available. And I was like, people like me are going to take your jobs away completely. I was like, because they could have still stayed running. If they only needed, so if you think like, there's been like prototypes of, restaurants, and then there's stuff in Japan where there's like an entire cafe that's one robot, right? It's very much like you see in car factories where it's like grabbing the cup and like filling everything and they hand it to you. That stuff is in development, and I wouldn't be surprised if people don't double down, companies, to, make themselves more resilient to these types of things in the future.
I think that's right. And we already know that the fast food places are sort of retooling their buildings to make them more drive-through and mobile pickup.
Yep.
And less dine in.
I was going to say that was exactly where I was going to go, Steve, is that there are some fast food establishments that I'm not convinced are ever going to open their dining room up again, or if they see the value of doing that.
Yeah. I think there are some, and I think they're looking very carefully at what exactly they want to do. And there will be things from the pandemic that live on. I think the most important of those is curbside pickup.
Yeah.
If I was a parent of 2 kids, imagine this scenario where I'm coming home after a long day. I pick up my 2 kids at daycare. I want to grab something for dinner right on the way home. I do not want to take my screaming children out of the car and go in and pick up my Domino's. I want to park and have Domino's bring it and put it in my trunk, just like in the commercial. Yeah. That's exactly what I want to have happen. And I think
groceries delivered to your door, grocery click list.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, that's the other stuff that's helped. The pandemic has kind of accelerated it's gotten people to digitize faster.
Yep.
Which is for the good in my book, because otherwise, it's just so much easier to do. I was a Starbucks, not like a huge Starbucks fan, but if I wanted Starbucks, I could always just place my order. I could get pretty much everything in my cart. And then when I'm on the interstate, I'll just hit buy real quick when I know roughly about 7 minutes out, pull in, bypass everyone in line, grab my cup, get back
it's
to my car.
just sitting on the counter.
And I just go.
It is all that stuff.
Amazing.
All that stuff is great. All of the food delivery, Grubhub and all that, I think that's going to sort out a bit more.
Yeah.
The interesting model. Do you know this place called Cluster Truck?
Yeah. Chris Baggett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know Chris?
I know Chris loosely.
Okay. That's real. So I'll come back to that. But for those who don't know Cluster Truck, what's interesting about Cluster Truck is, they set up kitchens. You can't dine in, and you really can't carry out, although technically you can. But what they're designed to do is deliver and solve, for me anyway, the problems with Uber Eats and all that, which is they won't start cooking. Cluster Truck won't start cooking your meal until they have a committed driver to take it.
Yep.
And so they're using some pretty sophisticated, as I understand it, AI type stuff to sort this all out. But I'm going to tell you something. The food's good, which is the most important thing. But their orders come when they say they are going to come, and they are hot and fresh every time. It's not, I mean, it's a crapshoot with those other places as to whether.
Jesse, help me with the context here. Chris Baggett is the guy from Exact Target.
So he's the guy that created Exact Target and sold it off to Salesforce.
Tyner Pond and Green.
The mug and all that stuff.
Right. So my Chris
Hancock
Baggett story.
County businessman.
Yes. My Chris story is that, so when they first opened in Fishers, it's 5 minutes from the house. So
is it in a Kroger?
Yeah, it's in a Kroger.
Yeah, because he
which is a
partnered with
really
Kroger.
Cool model. It makes total sense.
He just started doing that like last year. I think, or 2 years ago.
So the one in Fishers is right in a Kroger, and so I wrote him a fan letter, right? And I said, this is an amazingly cool model that you've developed here. And I said to him, I'd love to get together sometime and talk. I'd be really interested in having you up to Ball State to talk to our econ students, our entrepreneurship students. There's tons of interesting things you could do. And he was excited about this. And we made these plans to get together to have lunch. And he canceled on me for, presumably good reasons. And we've never sort of caught up with each other since. And you have reminded me that I need to have lunch with him. I will write him back. I still have the email.
I feel like
you should drive out to Greenfield and just go to Grigsby's. He might meet you there.
Yeah. I'll again, he seems like a great guy, really. And just because I pitch these things all the time, liberal arts college graduate too, who's been a very successful business person.
I feel like Steve Moves to Fishers could be like a fan mail letter once a month. Going from St. Lawrence County to Hamilton.
Well, right.
County.
There's
like it's the bountiful choices that you now have in your life.
Yes, indeed. But this model
is good. It's a good model. I love it.
Yeah, is really, and he's doing everything right. And they're extremely responsive. So they messed up one order one time, right? And I immediately they have a text number, and they promise to get back to you by text within 5 minutes. It's never failed. And, immediately said, we can bring you a new one, or we'll give you, we'll credit your account or whatever. And I took the credit to the account, and boom, no questions asked, done. And, I went into that Kroger one time. I call that my Reggie's Kroger, if you know the Seinfeld reference, right? I usually shop at the other one, but sometimes you got to go to the other diner.
Sometimes you go to Reggie's diner.
Yeah, sometimes you go to Reggie's. So that's the Reggie's Kroger. And I went in there one time to get something because I was in that neighborhood, and I started chatting with the staff at the Cluster Truck in there, and I was, I think, fanboying all over them too. So,
like I said, I've given some grace to that idea with Chris, and I said it would be really. I haven't told him this, but I was like with some friends. One of them just got out of culinary art school, and I said it would be really cool if Cluster Truck had like a labs type of thing, so where culinary art students could or not even just culinary art students, but like up and coming restaurateurs, like entrepreneurs could like partner with them, help with the recipes, help cook in the kitchens to build a brand. Yeah. And like he could work with a way to essentially it's an incubator for restaurants.
Right. And so one way to do that would be to have a rotating menu feature.
Exactly. That's exactly
that were from those folks.
Yeah. And he just obviously there's like paperwork and crap like that, but I think it would be a cool model to get and companies for
right.
food.
And there's also now in Fishers in the Yard District, whatever the name of that new development is on 116th, inside the Sun King Brewery is a little test kitchen that's got 3 different places.
I had a friend that worked in there.
Yeah. In fact, the former folks who used to be associated with Rook, may it rest in peace, my favorite indie restaurant.
That was really good.
Are been cooking in there too, and they were doing ramen for a while, which was outstanding. Now they're doing sandwiches. I'm not that as interested in that, but right. There's there's some way to bring those models together, and it would be great. Yeah.
So the last
this wasn't on our notes.
No, it's perfect.
But, that's
great. The whole point of the show.
I know.
Free-form conversations. We can go down any road.
Again, if I went to college, I'd be like, I would probably go into some economics sort of form that or psychology or both.
The last item that we did have programmed that I wanted to talk about was vehicles, because that once again, obviously John Phillips is a major part of this show. He's the Andy Moore Buick GMC in Fishers. And I've constantly had these
right down the block for me.
Right there. That's where I bought my terrain. That's out there. And Dakota's got his last 2 Buicks there.
A little hard to find now with the construction, but it's still there.
It's still, well, it's a big part of my business, that road construction. We never complain about orange barrels.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But yeah, we've seen all of these constant supply issues with vehicles as well. Yeah. So all of a sudden, a pickup truck, Jesse's talking about it. Cars are appreciating. A vehicle used cars are actually, you can buy it and
flipping a car. Who would have thought?
Zach, you've been talking about folks ordering a Corvette and they make $20,000 before they go pick it up.
Yeah, especially diesel trucks. People are getting offered $10,000 and $20,000 more than they paid for the truck to trade the truck in now, and then they'll get their new truck like maybe 2022 early, or at least deep third quarter or fourth quarter.
It makes me wish I had a secondary car.
So we have seen that some of the auto manufacturers saying that help is on the way, relief's coming. They're increasing production. I think that GM was going to start building 1,000 trucks more a month, trying to get some inventory back. And then I understand that there are some specific microchips. I think, Zach, you're the vehicle expert in the group, but I think it was dealing with fuel deactivation in their trucks, where they were basically building trucks, but they couldn't actually send them out.
That's a shame, but they should just shut that feature off and sell them without it, because it's awful. But yeah,
CAFE standards require it.
Yeah, I think it's just chips in general. Like the main, like there's only so many chip manufacturers.
Yeah.
And when their work orders come in, right, like some of it's going to be for AMD, some's going to be for, like, that's kind of what I think why Ford has an entire lot full of white trucks, is because they did not, they were like, yeah, we don't need them or something. And the chip manufacturer's like, all right, whatever. And so now they need them. And like Elon Musk has even said that he is paid ahead of time to get chips
to get to the front of the line.
Well, I think my guess it's probably to help them scale out something to make, so they can make more. Like, he's like, look, I'm going to like help you out. Here's all my money up front. Give me my chips when you can get them, but use this money to get them made faster. Like, and I think that was like his idea.
It's
like
kind of fronting capital by buying ahead of time.
Yeah, buying ahead of time. Yeah, exactly. And then allowing them to scale out so they can, kind of loosen that bottleneck, because he's arguably he's pretty good at economics himself, and more than I think people give him credit for. And I think he understands, like, okay, if I give these people money, like, it's going to help ease this pain.
It's going to benefit him as well.
It's going to benefit everyone plus him. Yeah.
So wrapping a bow tie around the whole conversation, Steve, are we just seeing a bunch of clunkiness in the economy as we're trying to restart, or are there other issues here that aren't COVID related that we're coming anyway and we're just?
Well, I think, I think most of what we've talked about are things that are clunky is a great word, that sort of just getting the engine restarted. That's not my favorite analogy, but sort of as demand picks up, as people get out and are doing more, the supply side is just not as responsive as we'd like it to be, and as flexible because of COVID, mostly COVID related stuff. I think the other thing that's been talked about quite a bit recently has been whether inflation is on the rise, right? And so a couple.
When I went to business school, and it was intro to business 101, we talk about the consumer basket of goods.
Yeah.
The items that fit into that basket for $100, or the price of that basket now has increased greatly in the last 6 months.
Yep.
But is it real if it's only for 6 months, or is it permanently inflated?
This is what we need to know, right? And so part of it is there's a couple things to keep in mind. Remember, things really slowed down. So if you're looking at year over year change, right, we were down in a trough, and now we're coming up again. And so that, whether it's just recovery or whether it's going to be sustained inflation, I think we got to wait a little bit and see what happens over the next few months. It's certainly the case that the printer goes brr, right? That the Federal, I know my memes.
I love it. Yeah.
that the Fed has been creating money at a ridiculous pace. Whether that's all entering into the spending stream and driving this process.
Much of that happened in the Obama administration as well, and we didn't see that inflation.
Right, and we did. So two things: we didn't see it in consumer prices. We saw some of it in asset inflation, right? And the housing
market's been
is
a bubble the whole time since
right.
then.
The housing market is we didn't learn our lessons from
the
15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Right.
2008.
Okay, right. So there's that. But on the consumer side, a lot of those funds that were created have sat in bank reserves, to some degree have sat in the cash hoards. I want to make sure we see the air quotes there.
And it's gone into Dogecoin.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole other topic. But it's gone into, people are sitting on it, right? And if they sit on it and it doesn't enter the spending stream, we don't see it as increases in the CPI.
I have a question for you with that. So if people continue to sit on their money, I guess that's not, I was going to say, I have already answered my own question. I was going to say, would you see,
I was watching the little hamster in there.
Yeah, I was like, would you see, so I'm thinking to bring up crypto for a reason, but what would be stuff that banks would try to do? Obviously interest rates, they lower them, right? To try to get like, hey, go buy stuff. But would they when you say sit on a lot of people
I
are literally
sit on it.
I was going to say a lot of people are sitting on it, not even in the bank.
Right.
Like a lot of people are like not even putting their money in the bank.
Yeah.
So like that, I know that's a separate thing, but I'm saying like, my question was going to be, would they offer more interest rate, like higher interest rates for people to put their money in savings or
to actually get somebody to deposit it? Is what you're saying.
But they don't want it. I mean,
the banks don't want it.
Right. The banks,
they want it to be turning.
So right. And plus the banks, remember, since 2008 are earning a quarter point or a half point or whatever on those reserves that the Fed's creating. So you're a bank, right? And you can get a guaranteed quarter point or a half point without having to spend the cost of figuring out who to lend it to, without taking on the risks of a bad loan. Why not just sit on it? There's no reason not to. I mean, the irony is we're in an economy right now. All the libertarians who love sort of Rothbardian 100% reserve banking, which by the way is all wrong. But we're in it. We have it, right? I mean, if you look at the ratio between the reserves that banks have and the amount of money in circulation, last I saw, it was actually over 100%, right? So they're sitting on all these reserves, and the challenge has always been, what happens, right? Do they just pile up forever and we just keep paying out the Fed Fed keeps paying out interest on that little quarter point or half point on those reserves. Eventually that adds up to something. Or what happens if it gets unleashed? What happens if the banks decide that we want to lend? The fact that they can't really bring interest rates down much lower, right, means that
how do you create a demand? Yeah,
you're not going to induce lenders. So it's a very weird world we're in with all that, and it's not wrong to be concerned about, okay, what would happen if this stuff really did get out and people started spending? We would see significant consumer price inflation. But if you look at the measures of people who are in the markets for these things about what the expected inflation rate is, it's still very modest.
Yeah. I was going to say, you see some signals, right? And again, some of this is just, I think, Biden being there and whatnot, but, silver has increased. Obviously the coronavirus increased it a lot, but it hasn't gone back as the market is starting to open. Silver, at least, I haven't looked at gold lately, is maintaining its value.
Yeah, I guess you can always pick two data points, right? In a lot of times my mind goes to politics. So you'll see the meme of, remember when, Trump was president and gas is $1.32 and Biden's president and it's $3.32 a gallon. Right. And you just randomly pick two data points and you don't have any concept.
Well, that's why we said Trump memes when he said people are looking year over year.
Right.
Like people are making crappy Trump memes.
Two data points. But I feel like a lot of this is just unanswered at this juncture, where we only have maybe 5 months of recovery time at this point.
Right.
So we don't have enough data to know.
And you can say whatever you want about Trump, but if you look, two things. If you go back during the pandemic, sure, gas prices were low because nobody was doing anything.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
So that doesn't last year to this year.
Yeah.
Now
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
There's a surplus of gasoline.
No, you gotta try to hold everything as constant as possible. Right. And there were good things about the economy under Trump. Right. And, even comparing unemployment rates, you got to talk about labor force participation and all these other kinds of things. Plus, the bigger fallacy here is believing, and this is a good Austrian elevator pitch, right? Believing that the economy's health or sickness is the result of who's president. At least for a while, it was true that the U.S. economy, the chairperson of the board of economic advisors to the president, who had the most successful 4-year run. You know who it was? Vacant. I don't think that's true anymore, but for a while that was true.
I remember that being a thing.
So we give politicians way too much credit, both going up and going down.
Right.
And I think earlier we were talking about you want someone to blame, right? And that's a human, that's deep in our psyche. And we want someone to blame, whether it's the president, the greedy oil companies, whatever the case may be.
An entire nation that makes all of our goods that we consume.
That was my point with the silver was like, people are, do you see that as like a hedge, right? Like it seems like more people are hedging right now against the dollar. Well, that's my point.
Folks are hedging, but the amount of, if I'm thinking about the average person that we're going to run into in our community out here, I don't think more than 22 people in this entire town are going, I'm going to buy silver.
Well, that's not the only asset to hedge in though. Like you can hedge in assets. You can hedge in to me right now, I would be buying property. To some degree, right? Like I know we're in a bubble.
Folks are going to say, it's a terrible time to buy property.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I'm saying if you were wanting to hedge your dollar, then it's not necessarily a bad time to buy property. That was my point.
Right. And I think people are concerned enough. Let me back up. I think reasonably sophisticated economic actors are concerned enough about inflation to want to have those hedges. But I think that's a fairly small percentage of the population. And I don't think, again, I don't follow this stuff super closely. I don't think we've had major institutional investors or whatever start to do this. It's not just sort of gold bugs and whomever, but it's a fairly small set of people right now. If we get several more months of continued, rising CPI or something, then we'll see what happens. But we got to wait and see if that's the case. To go back to a thing that's come up a few times. We've never really been in a context like this before.
No.
So we don't freaking know.
Yeah.
And that calls for humility, and that calls for stand back and let things.
It's a time where something Jesse and Steve were talking about at dinner tonight. So many of our internet forum theoretical conversations are living out before us.
Yeah.
And we're learning, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing how it goes.
I was going to say there's like a lot of institutional money moving into like Bitcoin, for example.
Yeah.
So those are people hedging their money.
Yep.
And that is like a market signal of, people are, it's interesting to watch, and they're hedge funds too, right? But not all of them. To devalue the dollar in the idea that they're buying something else with it, right? That's very interesting to me. You haven't seen that, I don't feel like, a lot ever. Like on an alternative currency, no one's like, well, somebody went and bought 1.5 billion yen, and maybe they are, but it's not announced.
It's not as visible.
Yeah. So again,
and you are seeing publicly traded companies that are spending their assets purchasing cryptocurrency to the point where crypto folks are buying buying companies that are investing in crypto.
So if you do that and you look at, so you can go on Twitter and follow a thing called like Whale Watch and watch the large sums of cryptocurrencies moving around. And I'm not talking like millions. I'm talking millions, but I'm talking like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of crypto whales moving their funds to different coins and everything, or like going into market or going out of market. It's just very insane to me. And we've never lived in it. I'm just like, I'm kind of glad I'm here to be like, well, it's either all going to go up in flames or we're going to build like a really awesome utopia.
You're the one person that's been like, I'm glad I'm alive for this.
I am.
Well, he bought his marshmallows and his bamboo sticks. He's just going to toast it over
Jesse's
the
doing
burning flames of the U.S. economy.
He's not afraid to street park his Lincoln.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw the car he was driving. Don't give me this poor stuff.
Zachary, we are getting to that point in the show where we need to start talking about final thoughts. What do you got to pitch over there, man? Am I going to get you convinced to go to Eldora later this month with me?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still
working on the permission slip.
Broad Street Cruise this weekend. Fiddler's Green will be set up there. I think there's going to be Food Truck Friday tomorrow downtown. So this will be the first Broad Street cruise I've been able to make. I've been out of town for all the other ones. So hopefully the weather looks good. I think it's going to be warm. But other than that, I think L&K is doing their thing every Saturday where they have food trucks and vendors and stuff out. So, go check out Cade and his group out there and all the stuff they're doing. So, and the farmers market's going. So all the fun local stuff going on.
Steve, what have we forgotten that we need to cover that we've left undone?
We've covered a lot of ground tonight. I was gonna make a totally unrelated pitch.
All right.
If folks haven't seen the wonderful Amazon's, or maybe it's Netflix series, The Kaminsky Method, season 3 just dropped, and you need to watch this show. This is
K with a Kaminsky or
Kaminsky with a K.
Is this about the White Sox?
No, this isn't. No, that's Comiskey. This is Alan Arkin and Michael Douglas as two old men trying to figure their way out through life. Any show with DeLon, I can't remember the exact line. I think it was I'm so old I pee in Morse code. That's a keeper. So that's my weekend. I'm going to sit down and binge watch season 3 of the Kaminsky Method.
Jesse, what do you say?
I don't have many final thoughts today. I just was glad to sit here and talk to you. So he invited me and he's like, so this guy, Steve Horwitz, is coming on. I was like, I know who he is. You don't need to tell me and sell it to me.
I start from zero.
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah. Well, you don't understand that with Jesse, it's, hey, I need you on the show. If I don't ask him 10 days in advance, he's like, oh, I'm already having beers with friends. Yeah. He's immediately with that. So I think it's 3 weeks out because Steve and I negotiated the date. Yeah. He's been playing very hard to get with me for years, but I'm so happy that you're back and that you're in a position to be back with us.
If I'm feeling okay enough, anytime, this is one of my favorite things to do.
We'd love to have you. But after my negotiation with Steve was complete, I had to start my negotiation with Jesse to get him in the building, so it worked out. And thankfully, because it turned out we weren't going to have Dakota tonight.
Yeah, I missed Dakota tonight. He's doing the right thing.
He's
doing the right thing, but we missed
that dad life.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts from me. I want to give a little recognition, shout out, as the kids would say. Kyle Robbins. I did get to go finally see him. He's the Newcastle, Indiana USAC Silver Crown driver. Been a guest on the show twice now. He invited me on the show to go get a pit pass and check out his races. So I drove all the way out to the Terre Haute Action Track last Thursday night, and I got rained out, Zach.
Immediately upon arrival.
I got there. I left. You were looking over my campsite with you and your lovely bride, April. And I said, hey, here's the code to my camper in case shit gets real. It's not supposed to, but in case it does.
Nasty looking line.
And then Kyle sends me a picture of the radar as I'm about 20 miles from the racetrack. And he's like, it might rain. I'm like, well, I'm coming. I'm there no matter what. And the radar looked horrific. I got to Terre Haute and I got to spend about an hour in they call it the Toad, which is maybe it's not the Toad, whatever, the puller, whatever, their rig, their camper, like a awesome Freightliner rig that they carry the race car in. Got to chat with him and the team for an hour, and then I said, all right, I'm just going to catch you tomorrow. They're going to race at Indianapolis Raceway Park the next day. I got Zach to go. We turned out in force. It was awesome. We saw them run some hot laps. Kyle came up from the pits and visited with us. It's the only driver to come out of the pits into the grandstand to hang out with everybody.
Never been to a race where the driver came out in his driving suit with a bag of chips and just sat down and chilled for 15 minutes. I was like, I didn't know there was a tunnel for them to come out. I'm like, where did he come from?
It was great. And then as soon as the support race before his was supposed to start, the skies opened up and it rained on us a second time. So I finally went a third day in a row. I went and we sat in 40-degree temperatures and we watched them race. And Kyle finished, I believe, 11th. I'm Ron Burgundy. And he had a tremendous race with Andy O'Gara. They fought back and forth for many laps. Kyle spun twice, but on the very last lap, he got back by Andy and got the position. So very fun. I'm looking forward to seeing him at Eldora in Ohio, June 26th. So they've got a couple of races coming up. I guess they're going to be in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, Williams Grove, June 18th, June 25th, out at Madison Raceway in Wisconsin, and then they've got Eldora and Winchester coming up later this summer. So very fun. Loudest race cars I've ever heard in my life. I love races. IndyCar, big Category 5 super fan. Obviously, we know that. First time I've watched the Silver Crown cars, and I was blown away at how loud they were, Zach.
Yeah, and I can't recall. It's been a while since I've been up as close as you are at IRP. Like that, their outside wall is a suggestion to stay in the track. I've never seen an outside wall. It's not as tall as the rear tires on those cars. I'm kind of curious as to what the sprint cars would sound like out there too, because that's even a kind of a bigger, gnarlier engine. Yeah, that was cool. I've been out to IRP in years, so.
All right,
get out there.
With that, we'll see you all again next week. I think it's going to be a host only episode Thursday of next week, assuming everything goes well. The audio and video will fire up. We'll be here for that, and then I think we have a terrible announcement to make that in 2 weeks we'll be joined by Mark Brim, but it may be the last scheduled Mark Brim episode in a while because he's getting his dream and he's moving to the ranch in South Dakota. Not kidding.
Going off the grid.
We're going to have our boy Mark Brim at least one more time. We'll see you all next time.